welcome back to the Adventures in Advising podcast. This is Matt Markin, and we have another guest-hosted episode. Our special guest host today, someone who was on the podcast way back on episode 51. Let's welcome back Dr. Gerron Scott. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Man, it's been a while. I am in a different institution, finished my PhD, started a podcast, Black and Diagnosed. I've done so much since the last time we spoke, and it's such a pleasure to be back here. I have so much to share with you all. It's going to be a great time. It's been such a pleasure. We've been following each other on social media, so I've been in tune with the podcast, and it's just great to be back.
Yeah, and I just remember how the original episode 51 came about. We were at a NACADA annual conference. I was just kind of set in the corner, just getting prepped for a presentation later. You and Tim came by, sat down, and we just got to talking, got to know one another, and it was like, hey, let's have this conversation and record it. And now you're back, and you mentioned a podcast. Tell us more about your new podcast.
So Black and Diagnosed is a podcast primarily to have Black people share their stories about mental health, and it really came about a lack of inequitable access to mental health care. So on it, I have folks with mental health diagnosis, healthcare providers, clinicians, psychiatrists, licensed therapists, just a way to give back to the community.
Very nice. And where can people find your podcast?
Spotify, Apple, YouTube. What else? Everywhere that you can find a podcast, you can find a podcast. Black and Diagnosed.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll bring on your guests, and I'm looking forward to your conversation today. Thanks again for doing this.
Of course. Hey, Brandi, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself now.
Hey, so first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Brandi Byers, and I am an advisor at the University of South Carolina. And I am almost to that doctor state. So Dr. Scott, I love it. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about disability advising and just life in general. I absolutely love the podcast idea.
So you're also the chair of the Advising Students with Disability. Can you tell us a little more about that?
So I've been the chair for the NACADA's Advising Students with Disabilities since 2024. Which is kind of wild that was 2 years ago, almost. And it's really been an eye-opening thing for me. I grew up with my mother supporting autistic youth, and now she works with visually impaired students who are also on the spectrum. Just always being around multiple different types of people, cultures, abilities, and it's been something that's been a passion of mine for a while. So when I started teaching in high school, I was like, oh, I love my students that I can help that have differing abilities in a variety of ways. And I taught math, so that's always kind of the subject. And then I just kind of transitioned into advising about 4 years ago. I actually had my 4-year anniversary of being an advisor, and just loved to figure out how to transition those students from high school to college and get their accommodations and get some of the things that they may be able to get that they didn't know they could need. So I came into that role with NACADA just because I was like, I'm interested in this, and this is a passion of mine. And it's blossomed to creating our own community at USC for specifically our students with disabilities. And it will hopefully blossom in the new NACADA community to being the chair of the identity development, which also houses LGBTQ, HBCUs, Latinx, so a lot of the cultural and differing ability groups, which is super excited for the next couple of years.
We're going to get back to that, but you are at USC.
Yeah, the USC. Yep.
I'm at
correct USC.
So you are rivals. I was told that I can't speak to people at USC.
Oh,
right?
Well, I guess we gotta.
They are our rivals. I can't even wear their colors or say their colors out loud. Like when I said, "Oh, USC, I like that school," they were like, "No, you don't." I said, "Oh, okay. I don't like that school."
It's okay. I won't hold it against you.
You mentioned something that really caught my eye was the concept of accommodations. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder during my PhD program. Crazy time. I was terrified to ask for accommodations, but I knew I needed them. But a lot of times during that transition from high school to college, a lot of students are afraid to ask for accommodations because they're like, well, I don't need them. I had them in high school, but I can do better. I can do better without them in college. I know I don't need them. I won't be a real college student if I use them. So how do you help students see that they might need accommodations, or how do you help students decide that to use accommodations?
Honestly, I feel like accommodations, it's a word that gets stigmatized too much.
Hmm.
Coming from a high school to a college, it's very different because you're under different laws. But as someone who also was diagnosed late in life, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism at 2 years ago almost, and dyslexia when I was 19. For me, it was like, well, I was fine until then. Like, I don't need these accommodations. For my students, a lot of the times, they there's two groups of students really. There's the group that thinks that they can get by without them because, again, like you said, I want to be a real college student. I don't need this excess. And then there's the group that doesn't know that they need them or what they need or how to get them. And so a lot of the times, what I've focused on a lot right now is language, like the language in which I use about it. So, like, I'm not broaching it from a subject of, hey, you should do this because you should. It's like accommodations are the bare minimum that the law covers. That is just protecting you. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere on your degree. Like a lot of them are like, I don't want somebody to look at me and say I had the easy way out because I had an accommodation. As a conversation I've had with students, I was like, it's not the easy way out. Like you're already here when everybody else is up here, like level wise. It's just getting you to the same level as everybody else. And then you don't have to use them. But I think for me has been a lot of language changes, a lot of more positive statements about like, "Oh, yeah," like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. In the pre-orientation advising appointment, the first one of the season this morning, 2 of the questions I actually added this year that I hadn't added in past was, "What has worked for you during this semester when things get tough?" And then, "What's something maybe you wanna work on?" And a lot of the times, that automatically brings out those conversations oh, well, I struggle with time management. And a lot of the time, some of that also brings out yeah, well, with my ADHD meds, I need to make sure that I'm in these time frames of classes and things like so the conversation naturally starts and there's no stigma behind it. It's just oh yeah, like that works for you, that doesn't work for you. Those are good things to know moving into college. And then we have that conversation of, "Hey, like you mentioned this. Have you thought about the Disability Resource Center? Here's the link to them. You can look at what they do. They are an amazing group of people, and they can offer you just some backup if you need it, because sometimes professors can be a little hard to handle, and maybe it'll help." And then giving it to them in that way where it's like, you don't necessarily have to. It's here for you. It's that support system. But also, like, it's just the bare minimum. Like, just being a normal human, changing the words for you're not good enough because you have this. There's a whole just like list of internalized wording that you have to help these students see beyond just the paperwork that says disability or whatever it might be.
Yeah, as I was doing my dissertation, it's on Black and bipolar disorder on college campuses. I learned that some of them did not have accommodations, and it has impacted their ability to do well in college. And as I was talking to them, it was out of that fear of that stigma that you just talked about. And a lot of the students, they just wanted to feel quote unquote normal. And I don't think there's a such thing as normal, especially when it comes to mental health diagnoses. Like we're just not gonna feel like the average person. It just is what it is. But one of the framings that I use is accessibility, right? It's not necessarily the accommodation, it's an equity and accessibility thing, right? You're getting equitable treatment. And a lot of students are They're like, okay, it's equity. So they're like, okay, we're reframing it from accommodation to equity. There are still some offices that use the word accommodation or disability, but I think they need to change their names to accessibility equity offices. I think that'll bring a better conversation, a better positive light to it. So when it comes to getting accommodations, what is the best way to go about it from a student, especially transition from high school to college?
It kind of depends. One of the things that I do a lot with the students is we do have a referral form that advisors can fill out. That was something that they added a couple of years ago for our Disability Resource Center. So if we might hear something in passing or hear a conversation with a student that lends us to say, oh, they might need these accommodations, but might need some assistance because a freshman gets bombarded with information overload. Let's help their cognitive load and say, okay, let me go ahead and do this. I've done that with freshmen and say, hey, do you mind if I like refer you here and they can contact you and you can decide on your own like what you might need. And a lot of them are like, oh yeah, that actually would be great because you're taking that stress, that load off of them. Or hey, my mom talked about this. Like sometimes it's the parents that will get involved and I'll be like, okay, well your parents talked about this, what do you think about it? Like, do you want to do this? Here's these resources. The other thing I would say that it's really helpful is actually making sure the advisors know the resources that you have. That was the biggest thing because we have communities of practice at USC that focus on different parts of advising. And I realized that the only reason I knew a lot about accommodations and accessibility was because of my mother and her job, how I grew up, and then being a high school teacher and being in, I honestly like would love to be in 504 and IEP meetings because I like to talk about how the student intrinsically can do better. You're not less than, you're just more complicated and complex, and we have to kind of delve into those complexities, and that's absolutely fine because you're human. But I didn't know anything about college accommodations. Like, I got a couple of letters saying my students had this, this, and this, but nobody was teaching advisors how to advocate for their students. Nobody was showing them the resources. There was I think one presentation a year where it was like, here's the intro to the SDRC, here's the information, and then add that to the binder or document or spreadsheet that we all have of things we never look at again until we need them, kind of thing. And so one of the things that I was like, you know what, like we have these communities about all these other things, technology, orientation. Why don't we have a community about these students? We don't have to like change laws or anything, but I really just want to get information out there about students, about what these students can have access to. And that led to creation of our like local community at USC. And we've done trainings, everything from like the intro training to like specifically visually impaired students, the transition from high school IEP 504 to college. We've talked a lot about how to help students with that, how to recognize our own ableism language and things like that. Especially like you were saying, like it's not a disability. Like I don't call it a disability. I call it differently abled or differable, depends on what I'm talking about. And then I also will say like I'm neurospicy. I'm not just neurodivergent. Like my personality is spicy. It fits. So it's like being able to educate advisors is really helpful. And then also recognizing that a lot of institutions don't always have the support that we might too. Like my advising directorate was absolutely on board with me doing this, and we have a little Teams chat of like 17 to 20 different individuals from across campus who are a part of like planning and things like that. But then going into NACADA and hearing other stories about people who don't have that support system and what can we do to help our advisors. And that's really where, for me, the language came in. One of the things that I made sure that I was walking into advising was, and not just advising, but teaching is trauma informed, coming from a trauma lens, because what we're doing and what we're dealing with are these experiences both academically in their life that can be traumatic. Like you were saying, like being diagnosed bipolar is a scary thing. It is just something an unknown. That is your body reacting to something that is traumatic. So us as advisors, we either feed the trauma or we diffuse the trauma based on the language we use. And so that has been my big goal in the last like couple of years with USC specifically and with NACADA is just throwing the language out there, talking about what's good, what's bad, because sometimes we don't have the capability to do it, but we do have the capability of being a community, especially virtually nowadays.
Yeah, I think being in community is one of the most important things we have. And I also think educating our community, as you said. I'm big on presenting. I love presenting. It's probably like my favorite thing to do. If I could each one teach one, I love that. So I've doing actually a presentation to this upcoming NACADA. Fingers crossed I get to go. I had a presentation accepted on disability, helping advisors understand disability a little more. Just because I think it's such an important topic. It's something I'm passionate about. I have a physical disability. I'm an amputee as well. So just disabilities galore in this conversation, which is great. I think allowing people of disabilities to speak for ourselves is so important. That's why I love that we're able to have this conversation, because it's really giving a platform for people with disabilities to speak up, right? And oftentimes we're being spoken about and we're not being, or spoken to, we're not given the platform to speak up for ourselves. And that to me is not good enough, right? No research without us, right? You can't be talking about people with disabilities without people with disabilities in the room. And that often happens across intersectional identities, right? There's that deficit mindset of the 90s of this group is bad because of this, because of that. So let's talk about your journey from ADHD and autism. How did that develop?
Yeah, it's a long story. Um, it was interesting because I grew up with a mother who was, I love her to death. I really do. So if she ever listens to this, I'm sorry. But she was very, very tough, very authoritarian, very like 100 or bust, this or bust. So like I was also very driven in that regard growing up. So like school was never a problem for me. I was a four sport athlete. Like I played volleyball at the University of South Carolina. So like I was doing a bunch of stuff from high school into college. So like doing stuff is something I'm familiar with. But when it got to a point where I didn't know how to study, in my freshman year of college, I was traveling with volleyball. It's a fall sport, so obviously you jump straight into it. I just I was like, I don't know how to study, but I'm just gonna figure it out. I'll figure it out like I have my entire life. And so when I came back from one of our volleyball trips, I ended up like getting a poor grade on a history paper, which history is not my strong suit, not gonna lie. And I was like, why? And so I ended up talking with somebody and getting tested for dyslexia because I was like, I just keep misspelling things. I've misspelled my own name backwards a couple of times. Like it literally happens at least once a day. But I was like, no, I can't have that. Like maybe that's just why I did bad on the history paper. But then like I had never gotten a grade less than an A until that first semester as a math major, getting a C in my first math class. And I was traumatized because I had no idea why things in my brain were clicking. And fast forward probably 4 or 5 years later, I managed to get my math degree. God bless. Don't know how some days. I managed to get my secondary, like master's in education and started teaching. And obviously through there was a whole lot of stuff, including mental health diagnoses. I am also a almost 3-year survivor of thyroid cancer, and so cancer has been a part of my life. Massive, like, blood clots that almost killed me have been a part of my life in the last 10 years. So not only do I get, like, the mental health part of it and, like, the brain part of it, it's also the physical part of it. That led me to really change my view on like instead of running away from an ability or something that I thought was a bad thing, I was like, you know what, I need to advocate for myself and try and be the best me that I could be. And so that led to me getting tested a couple years ago. I think it was like 3 years ago. Um, because my mental health professional, my counselor, my therapist, she's like, one day just randomly, she's like, can you take this ADHD like random quiz for me? And I said, sure. It does run in my family, actually. My cousin and my aunt also have it. But I was just like, no, like this is not like not me. And then when I scored like one of the highest scores there, she's like, yeah, we're gonna get this evaluated. And I was like, cool. So I ended up doing that, and it was kind of I'm still honestly in the intro phase of that because when you rate yourself at this level and then you change your level to what in your brain seems like less than, there's this mentality of like mourning what you've lost. And so for me, I'm still in that trying to figure out what ADHD and autism together kind of look like in my life, like things that work, things that don't work, and then things that like frustrate me but are also something that's valuable. Like I get home and sometimes I can't do anything else but sit and like play video games and like let my brain rest. And that is something that my brain is telling me, not because I'm lazy, not because I'm like less than. So I'm honestly still in that figuring out stage because I'm trying to convince myself like you can't go back. Like none of us can go back to past us's. So we have to kind of live and love ourselves as we are. And that's really for me what helps my students is because I'm like almost too honest sometimes. But I'm just like, look, I'm going through the same thing as you guys are right now. Like I just had to deal with it a little bit later. Um, but it is just as frustrating. And sometimes that's how I can connect initially with a lot of those students because we can have those conversations about, oh yeah, if I don't put it in here, I'm gonna forget.
Yeah, as a result of my dissertation, I came up with the theory of disability acceptance. Part of that theory is like pre-trigger where you're not aware that you have a disability, then a trigger event is like something happens where you get diagnosed. In your case, it was your therapist saying like, hey, can you take this quiz?
Yeah.
But the next part is what you just alluded to was some of that stigma, that internalized stigma, that external stigma, where it's just like, what can I do? Sometimes I feel like I can't do anything about it. Then the next part was like acceptance. So when did you learn to accept a disability, and what was that process like?
TBD. I call myself a recovering perfectionist right this moment because it's a work in progress. So I honestly say that I don't have that full acceptance yet.
Hmm.
I do advocate for my students more than I advocate for myself in a lot of ways, and so I've had to learn. And thankfully, my wonderful wife is super helpful with that, of kind of calling me out and being like, no, like people love you as you are. You have to remember that. I also think that in the research that I'm doing is with honors college STEM students currently, and then hopefully hoping to open that up on how their fear of failure impacts their motivation and impacts some of their decision making in their first year of school because you talk about the intersection of identity. A lot of these students, especially in like the science and tech areas, they have these imposter syndrome issues. They have their intersecting cultural identities, their disability identity, their like anything that you can possibly think of. And all of these are coming together at a head. And then they insert, oh, well, you might have this disability that like kind of takes the Jenga and like undoes it. So for me, honestly, I think I'm better at helping students with that than myself. But I definitely do see the growth in myself now, like looking back retroactively at the times that were not so nice and not just changing the language with students, but with myself too, and recognizing like, hey, this doesn't make you any less than if you have to, like, let's say, use a handicap spot. I've fought a lot of battles with invisible disability, and like every single one of my disabilities is not visual. Like you can't even really see the scar on my neck. That was my 10-hour cancer surgery. And people on campus and off campus being like, well, why does she need this? Even to the point of a worker yelling at that, oh, if you're overweight, maybe I should go to the DMV and get this so I can get a handicap permit and park closer up. And so like for me, it's really been a battle of what I think about myself internally, and then what our institution and what our kind of society thinks about it, like balancing those with what it actually is just something unique. Like you said, you don't believe in normal. I don't either. I think normal's overrated. But it has been a struggle, especially recently, with just I think the same issue that our students deal with. If you don't physically necessarily have some way of showing something, a lot of the times you don't have as much like respect in that world too. So acceptance is a long way off for me, I would say, but I would definitely say that I am on the track towards it. And just like you, I love presenting, so having the opportunity to be the chair and like to present on some of these things that are forthcoming has been really valuable and healing for myself just as much as helpful to hopefully the advisors that I can talk to.
Definitely. And I think acceptance is ongoing, and I'm glad you're working towards that. I'll tell a quick story. I have a handicap placard as well, and I look like I'm not handicapped. I look like I'm not an amputee because I walk as fun. I do lose my balance from time to time. My wife will tell you she'll catch me. She'll be like, "Oh, you lost your balance," and I'll be like, "Yeah." And we'll be standing still, or we'll be walking, and I'll just like slip, or I'll just lose my balance. And learning to walk again was hard. That is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But she's there. My wife is amazing. But I was getting out of the car, in my car, and somebody was like, "Really? You're going to park in a handicap spot?" And the person was very upset that I was parking a handicap spot. And I've never really seen someone that angry at a random stranger before. I'm like, dude, you don't know my story. Like, you don't know why I parked there, right? But and it's interesting that we come across so many students that we don't know their story, right? And the professors and other staff members don't know their story. And that as advisors, we have to earn their trust to be able for them to share our stories, share their stories with us. And one of the things that you mentioned before earlier was holistic advising. I think part of my person I always present is Tim Cox, Dr. Cox, and he talks about the intersubjective relative approach, which he coined was really sharing our identities with our students to help them understand, to connect with them on a deeper level through that holistic advising. So using our intersectional identities to really inform that advising approach. So part of what we need to do as advisors is this, I think something that you do is share who we are with them so they're more comfortable with us. So what advice would you give to advisors who, say, I'm not comfortable sharing who I am because our relationship is for me to help develop them, not for me to share who I am with them.
My first thought would be, well, you need to find a different career. However, I also understand that there's a bunch of different types of people out there and not everybody is as open. For me, I guess I would start with saying like, well, what would you be willing to share? Like you're going to have to in those conversations to be what I personally would consider a successful advisor is connecting with your students in some way, shape, or form. So a lot of the times what we do in appointments is we connect with what the students say. So like exactly what you just did with your story and like the frustration of like a complete stranger being like, why do you have this permit? we connected on that level based off of a story. And like you had said, like everybody has a story. You don't have to share all the nitty-gritty kind of things to be supportive of your student. You can take bits and pieces that you do feel comfortable with. It's interesting because there's such a dichotomy of like advising philosophy. Like there's the very much focus on courses, coursework, student development side, and then there's like the appreciative advising, the holistic advising. And I honestly think if we blend the two of those together, it actually makes for a better experience in advising. That's part of the reason why I actually started my own PhD journey in educational psychology and research, because what I really was fascinated by, other than math, because I'm a math nerd at heart, was why do students relate? How do they relate, and why do they relate to advisors in some specific way, and or like how can we kind of help the students from a personal level see their own humanity, their own identity beyond just here are your courses, go away. Because that was my advising experience when I was a student here at USC way back in 2009 was math professor, here's your classes. Okay, go ahead. You're good. Whatever. So for me, like the kids who really want or the students who really want that buy-in will continue to buy in. The ones, even the ones that don't, like I thought some of my math majors absolutely hated me because I was more like, yay, exciting emotion. And they were like, no, just give me my classes and go. And one of them actually came to my office last week before graduation to say she had gotten a full ride to UNC for like mathematical biology and like complete PhD full ride. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought this child hated me because I was always the happy go lucky fuzzy person and she wasn't. So sometimes it's just like pick out the things that you feel comfortable with sharing. Um, and then also like continue your own learning. I think is really important for advising because if you're just doing the same old, you're not really learning, you're just kind of stagnating and you're doing what you can, you're getting your paycheck, you're getting whatever, but like are you really learning? Are you modifying to what's happening in the world? So for me, it's really just been like long-term goal is to have something like a disability inclusion kind of disability advocacy advising kind of holistic combination. Look more into ways that we can do like things like um, fear of failure and motivation trainings and things for students, for advisors, words to use, just continuing the conversation in a larger way.
Yeah, let's talk about that fear, failure, and motivation. In what ways can advisors help students with that?
Well, the best way that I have found so far, I'm still very, I would say, early in my like what I call my tiered progress of PhD life, would just be to kind of really talk to the student about what works and what doesn't work for them. Because what's going to come out of that conversation is things that they may have tried, professors that they may have enjoyed in past. My student this morning was talking about how she really liked the smaller honors class sizes and that she really liked the fact that chemistry specifically was very um, like formulaic and like mathy and quantitative, and biology was very like applicable. And together, she really liked those two things together. So what that was telling me about her was okay, so she really does like a little bit more of a structure. So what that kind of means is okay, let's retroactively go back. Her motivation maybe on the higher end if she has a structured environment, but then let's say she's in a seminar class that's a little unstructured, she may end up having some excess anxiety about a different type of class. So, what that has done for me is okay, I don't think she necessarily has said, oh, I'm afraid to fail or anything like that. What she has done is shown me that just with those simple questions, that her motivation kind of lies in that structure. And so knowing in my brain that like the biochem major, for example, is very structured, will be helpful to her. But each professor is different. And so, like for me, if I see that she has a certain professor, a certain course that's definitely a little different, like having those touch points of like, hey, like I know that you're used to this. How's this class going? Things like that, having that conversation, but also sometimes it just is like, how do you feel? How confident do you feel about college? How confident are you feeling? And my goal, hopefully, in the fall would be to expand my study that I'm doing right now to test their fear of failure and motivation beginning of the semester, after exam one, and end of the semester to kind of see how it fluctuates over time in that first semester of classes. Because what that's going to do is help us not only figure out what we need to kind of help them with, it helps us figure out when. Because a lot of the times we like to throw there a bunch of information in the beginning, and then maybe they need it after exam one. Maybe they need some time management skills. Maybe they need some resilience and just motivation practice in the middle of the semester, or like kind of a mentor group of like upperclassmen paired like after exam one to kind of think through, okay, this might not have gone as well as you'd had hoped. Here are some suggestions when I was a freshman. Like, so what I'm trying to do really is figure out what are those little bits and pieces that don't take away too much of student time and advisor time that we can do, and when during the time should we do them without like just giving them another link or another page to look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things you said was mentorship. I love mentorship. I was in the emerging leaders program for NACADA some years ago. Plug to that. I know if this recording is up and you're listening to it and the cycle is open, apply for the NACADA Emerging Leaders Program. Best 2 years of my life. It was great. If you're able to be a mentor, apply for a mentor, mentee, just apply to the program, whatever capacity that you can. It's an amazing program. So one of the things I strongly believe in is the power of that mentee-mentor relationship. So what are some ways that students could use or advisors can use that mentee-mentor relationship, maybe that senior freshman or even that upperclassman, lowerclassman freshman motivational that you just mentioned for the advantage of that first year student?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would say the first thing, at least here, that we have is our upperclassmen as peer leaders in our University 101 or our freshman seminar class. More, for me at least, more STEM students are opting to go back and do that for our STEM students. So they have somebody who's been there, who's done that, who has um, kind of dealt with those kind of challenges. I'm not teaching this fall, but I was a seminar teacher, and one of my peer leaders was actually my own advisee, who was a chemistry major and who was a pre-dental student. We tried to get in orientation, some of our advisees in my class or Mia's class, my counterpart, because we were the advisors for those majors. So what we did is we really just ended up with this group of freshmen, my wonderful peer leader who had been there and lived there, and then me, who was also advising a lot of those students. And obviously, we did have some from different majors, which was actually helpful. But there were 2 or 3 students in there who were pre-dental, and so my peer leader was the president of the dental club on campus. And so what she did is she ended up folding those students in to that community by just being present and being a part of that as a peer leader. And so that's one way of doing it. What I really, I think, want in our department to see is if we can get like our seniors, juniors, and seniors willing to do some form of, even if it's just an informal kind of first semester mentorship, and like pair our freshmen that are coming in with a senior, to see if they have questions, they have concerns, things like that. Maybe do specific pairings for like honors college or capstone students for Carolina with specific honors and capstone students so they can kind of make the most of their time. And I think it's really important for us to try and find those little mentorship opportunities that don't take away too much, I say time and money, but really just say, hey, like you're a pre-dental student. This freshman coming in is really interested in dentistry. You guys should connect and go for coffee. But I also think that like there is a lot of work that needs to be done in higher ed with the mentorship side because I literally never would have gotten to where I am right now had I not had like my wonderful doctoral advisor who's helped me with grant writing and like I am horrible at writing, not horrible, but writing is not my favorite. So
Yeah, I dig it. I'm also on the STEM side. My undergrad's in biology, and my advising career has been in STEM, biology advisor, then environmental studies, and now I'm director in the College of Science. Um, so let's talk about disability in STEM. So we're both in STEM fields. How do you believe having disability impacts STEM students specifically?
well, honestly, the first thing I could say is that it's probably the group paired with engineering would be my other group that I would think of that is the least likely to disclose um, because STEM fields in are what's called like pressure cooker fields in a lot of the research and things that I've looked at. The calculus classes, the calculus heavy majors, people want to go to med school, people want to do all of these things post grad that STEM is kind of the basis for. They are the least likely to disclose their disability, first off. And also, a lot of the STEM fields have labs, have extra requirements, not only time requirements, but physical requirements. Like, we had a student who was allergic to certain metals. And so she, being a chemistry major, had to do chemistry labs, but had to do them differently. So, like, there's certain kind of unique experiences with a STEM major that don't have the capability of like accommodations. Like, how would you bring a service dog, for example, into a lab setting? Like, how does that work? Like, the other side to that too is there's this huge stigma that if you have a disability in STEM, like you're either less than, you're not good enough, or you are trying to kind of cheat the system. The other side of a, oh well, you have accommodations, you get special privileges, and like it's this hierarchy of like you have to be here to be good enough. You have to be the highest of the high. So there's just it's just something that's I don't know honestly where it came from, but I also think it's just the competitive job market, the competitive post grad that's getting worse, and funding, things like that don't help the students feel like they're actually okay where they are.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that because I'm thinking back to when I was undergrad and undergrad. I'm like, would I have disclosed? And I don't think I would have, right? As a biology student, it is very competitive, and I didn't want to feel like I had a crutch, right? Being just being in that space where especially as a first generation student, it's just like, hey, do I need to I didn't want to feel like I had a leg up, or I was benefiting from a system that wasn't designed for me, or I'm cheating the system. So that pressure, that extra pressure that was there to succeed, that disability, that accommodation would make me feel like I was less than, or I wasn't doing my part, or I was cheating the system. So I feel that. I think in STEM, a lot of students would probably feel that way because I think I would have felt that way as well. Thinking back to your undergrad, would you have felt that way?
Yeah, I didn't disclose anything. I mean, my mom really doesn't even know. Like, I mean, some of my family does, but like, I only within the last like 2 years of my PhD actually like registered with Disability Resources. I could have done it way back when. I just that same thing. Like, I don't want to seem like I'm getting extra. And like also with for me the added layer of being a student athlete where at a Division 1 school where they were like, "Oh yeah, you already get extra." Um And I'm like, no, like I don't want to be classified as that. Like, why do we label somebody and classify them based off the label that we give them societally when there's so much more to it than that? But yeah, no, I mean, to do that, and also I think in STEM, the professors, as much as they are wonderful, and there are wonderful STEM professors out there, they are tough and they are less likely to see the student as working from a deficit already and like trying to get themselves up to a student trying to take advantage of the system. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different types of instructors, and you can definitely tell ones who are like, just suck it up and deal with it, versus the ones who are willing to accommodate the students and kind of guide them, because a lot of them don't know how to advocate for themselves and what they actually need, and they don't want to seem like they want extra. So they don't know how to have that conversation, and then the instructor automatically is like, no, shuts them down. And then a lot of the times they end up in our offices because we have to then talk to them a lot about like, okay, well, this professor is not shutting you down. Here's a good like script. Here's a good thing or way to word this so that you can hopefully get that support. And then a lot of the times that ends up leading to them like withdrawing and switching majors or withdrawing from courses, or like you said, not getting the accessibility needs that they might actually truly need. So I think that actually plays a whole lot into that as well.
Yeah, and it's also getting the legal accommodations that you're supposed to get. A lot of times students don't realize like these are legal accommodations you're supposed to get. But you touched on something, you just got it in the past couple of years. And it's almost hypocritical, right? Because we advocate for our students. We say, go get what you need. But as PhD students, it's like, well, I should be able to do this without accommodations. I remember the semester I got diagnosed, my study was qualitative, and I got a B in qualitative, right? But I can tell you every single type of qualitative research there is off the top of my head still. Um, and I took qualitative 4, 5, 6 years ago now, 5 years ago at this point. I can tell you everything about qualitative. And that's my only non-A during my PhD program. And that's what made me realize, like, hey, I need to get serious about this accommodation because, you know, I'm better than this, right? I was struggling in a class I shouldn't have to struggle in because I was going through, I just got diagnosed. The medication was running through my body. It was, it was just going really things which is awful for me, right? And anybody with bipolar would tell you that those mood stabilizers suck, right? They are awful, right? Anyone would tell you that. But because of that, I learned to be a better advocate for my students, right? It wasn't just with words. It was like, no, I know how you feel, right? I get it. You're gonna get these accommodations. If I have to walk with you to those accommodation offices, you're gonna get those accommodations. One thing I don't like about accommodation offices is they require you to get the documentation before you can get the accommodations. I did come across one institution while I was doing my study that they get one semester of accommodations before you need the documentation. I love that because uh, healthcare in America is it is what it is, right? It's going to be a while before you can get into that psychiatrist. It took me a month to get into a psychiatrist before I got diagnosed, and that was because someone canceled and they had an opening.
Right.
So having an 18-year-old, 19-year-old navigating a healthcare system is going to be impossible, right? Or damn near impossible. So what do you think institutions should do in order to help students get those accommodations?
I mean, honestly, I would love our healthcare system to get itself together. But I mean, one of the things that we've been trying to compile at USC has been like lists of like sliding scale practitioners who partner with our university our counseling and mental health center, like, even if we can get some form of documentation saying that, like, maybe you've done, like my therapist had me do the quick ADHD screen, even though I wasn't on ADHD meds in that moment, maybe they could have written a letter to say, like, "Hey, like, bare minimum, she can get this accommodation sooner rather than later." Um, it's just it's that is the hardest thing, and I think that earlier is better when it comes to our institutions. Like, we like to put a lot of fun, like, classes and AP credits and things like that. But, like, why are you not having these conversations with these students when you meet with them for orientation? Why are you not walking them through this process or giving them this, like, or like you said, walking them across campus? Um, and I think that it really is like, in your advising practice, there is going to be a time where you have to kind of make that decision of, are you going to just continue to advise for courses, or are you going to kind of buy into it? And I think for me, like, with my cancer journey, honestly, was easier to deal with and actually helped me realize that, like, all of the other little labels and things weren't as bad, because it's like, you're missing an organ in your body. You have to actually, like, sit down and think about what that means. Like, you're missing an organ, you just dealt with this. And then what that did was like, okay, well, if I didn't know about this for this long, like, I'll be 36 in December. It took me until I was like 33 to figure out the ADHD autism diagnosis. Our students don't need to wait that long, so why aren't we helping them, give them those resources early? Why aren't we telling the advisors, "Hey, did you know about this? Did you know what a bed shaker is?" A lot of people don't know what a bed shaker is, but for our hard of hearing students, they can't hear the fire alarm or they can't hear the doorbell. They have something that shakes their bed awake for emergencies. I found that out because I talked to somebody in housing that talked about housing accommodations. So, like, disability is not such some niche thing that people kind of buy into or don't buy into. It's something that you can use that benefits every single student that walks through your doors, whether they have a disability or not.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for being with us today. I know we had a great conversation. You shared a lot. You shared a lot about yourself and a lot of yourself. And I think anytime someone can do that with me, it's very important. You're very insightful. I just want to say thank you again. Do you have any last words for our listeners?
Honestly, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, we need people who love this profession just as much, and we need people who love our students just as much. So, like, if you need a little pick me up that just says, like, you're doing it and it's okay to have a bad day, but you keep doing it. We got to push back against the negativity and be the positive that we need. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, and hopefully my voice will come back a little bit more in the near future. But I appreciate you and the work that you do as well, and definitely about to go subscribe to that podcast of yours too.
Thank you.